Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to start a series of vlogs describing my symptoms. I do have a symptom playlist and I believe I have done videos on all of my symptoms. They're probably older, they're probably like from before I had this phone, probably a few years old. And I'm not really sure how in depth I got into with each symptom. And even with each symptom, there are different parts of the body that a single symptom will affect, if that makes any sense. Um, so I kind of figured that breaking it down and being a lot more specific might be helpful, especially for those of you that are still searching for a diagnosis or that are having, the same symptoms and you don't really know what, is wrong. So I wanted to start with my muscle stiffness or spasms. I'm not really sure. The way that I describe it is stiffness. It's also named stiff person syndrome because it causes stiffness, but one of the sort of hallmark symptoms of stiff person syndrome is spasms, which technically I don't have. The way that I would tell the doctors or describe it to the doctors was like my muscle went into spasm and never went out. So basically it's stiffened up and it doesn't fluctuate or change or anything like that. But the symptoms have evolved as I've gone through treatment. So it's been already, well, since the onset of some of the stiffness, it's been probably 15 years or almost 17 years. And the stiffness in the rib cage, I think it's been probably more like 10 to 12 years. And it feels different in each area, which is why I feel like I should go area by area with the symptoms, because the same symptom will feel different in different parts of the body. But I'm starting with the muscle stiffness in the trunk. So basically my rib cage area. That's the largest, I would say that's the largest affected part of my body. And so I can feel the symptoms very, very clearly in this area. And I'm going to try to describe it like the onset of the symptoms, the evolution of the symptoms, because they have evolved, and then whatever has helped the symptoms. So when I first started with this symptom, I want to say it was probably 2000. I was living in my apartment. So I was living with my boyfriend at the time. We would eventually get married. So I think we moved in together around, 2010 or 2011, because my symptoms started the same year. I think that, yeah, the same year that we moved into that apartment. So I think it was like 2011. It felt like I had done a bunch of sit-ups. So when I started having these symptoms, it felt like I had done a lot of sit-ups. And at the time, I think I was like doing Pilates or something, like just in the apartment. I wasn't going to like a Pilates class. I think I had like a DVD or something, and it was like Power Pilates or something. So I really thought that I had hurt myself doing Pilates, but it kind of didn't make any sense. Um, because I was like, how could I have? I mean, it's not like, very strenuous Pilates. I was also using a tennis ball to work out the muscles in my body. You can use a tennis ball and like roll it on your back against the wall or roll on your abdominal muscles along the carpet. And so I thought that possibly I had injured myself using the tennis ball and rolling it on my abdominal muscles. And I'm kind of thinking either I had started doing that because I was already experiencing symptoms, because it doesn't make sense that I would have done that prior to experiencing symptoms. So that very tense, like when you work out a lot, when you work out your muscles a lot, that soreness I had in my abdominal muscles. And so I thought, either I hurt myself or I was overexerting myself. And so I stopped doing that kind of exercise. At the same time, and I'm kind of not sure if it's related to what was happening structurally in my body or if it was just something that happened because my inflammation was increasing at the time, but I was also having GERD like symptoms. So, like acid reflux, nausea, kind of this weird, kind of like a sour taste in my mouth. So, I started having that at the same time. And I'm not really sure what the origin of it was. It could be a few different things, but I do have my theories, and I'll kind of get into that, as I continue to describe this. So the symptoms continue to evolve, they continue to worsen. And that's the thing, that's one of the things that I noticed, is that I believe it took like 6 weeks from the initial symptoms of the soreness, of the abdominal soreness, to the final product of the stiffness and the immobility of the muscles. It took about 6 weeks from what I can remember. So it wasn't something that happened overnight. And I imagine, now that I look back, there were probably other signs and symptoms leading up to, even that muscle soreness, but they were things that I wasn't really paying attention to, because I mean, why would I have thought that anything was going on? At that point, I still didn't know that I had an illness. I had other symptoms and I had other parts of my body that were affected, but I kind of was just like, well, I just have bad muscles, or, I didn't think that it was an illness that I had. So it began to evolve, and I started feeling this kind of, I want to say it's like a burning sensation. The best way that I can describe this, if you guys know what an Indian burn or a hot tamale is, there's no non-racist way for me to describe it. I don't know a name for it. It's when, we used to play as kids, we would grab each other's arms and twist in opposite directions. So we would twist one hand this way and one hand that way. We would twist the skin of the arms, and it gave you like a burning sensation. And I know some people call that like an Indian burn or a hot tamale. That sensation, but along the rib, like the whole rib cage felt like that. And of course, tight, it felt like I couldn't breathe sometimes. A lot of times they tell you to breathe, belly breathe. So to breathe from your belly, not from up here. I could no longer do that. I physically could not push my stomach out to breathe. Like, it felt like I was hitting a wall almost. I just couldn't do it. And it was uncomfortable as well. Like, I would feel even like shooting pains, nerve pain. Sometimes I would get the pain. I remember even getting that pain across the chest, like little pinching pains, that would just kind of shoot across, especially if I really forced and tried to breathe from my belly and not from my chest. I would describe it as a corset. Like, I was locked into a corset, especially in those early, in those early days when the muscles were setting into this new stiffness. It felt like a corset. Of course, if you've ever worn a corset, anybody that has worn one, if you bend over, it feels like it gets even tighter. And it was the same sensation with my muscles. If I would bend over, it felt even tighter. I could no longer bend over like I couldn't touch the floor. It was just very, very uncomfortable. Tying shoes, painting my toenails. Those are like the most, and I can't say, like, now I can't say that it's like painful. It is just very uncomfortable because you feel a lot of pressure in your abdomen. It's squeezing your abdomen. And I think that may contribute to the GERD symptoms, because if it's squeezing my abdomen, it's squeezing my stomach, and it could be pushing stomach acid up. So that was one theory that I had, although later on I would discover that that was probably just part of the, like, one piece of the puzzle. So that's very, very uncomfortable. You have increased pressure on the stomach. Laying on my back, I couldn't sleep on my back. I've never been a back sleeper, but definitely couldn't sleep on my back. It felt almost like I had pressure, and it made it difficult to breathe. And I think I even stopped breathing sometimes if I accidentally fell asleep on my back. And that's not pleasant. So what are the things that have helped? So I was just in a really, really bad place. I did develop GERD symptoms. That's another symptom that I have, but obviously with the extra pressure, that's not helping matters. So when I first started seeing my Lyme literate physician, and this was long before the SPS diagnosis, she put me on a diet. So it's a low amylose, which means like no sugar, no dairy, no wheat, no soy. You eliminate all the major allergens. And that calmed a lot of the nausea, and I think it helped with some of the GERD symptoms. And I want to say that it did somewhat help the tightness in the muscles. Now, it did not resolve the tightness, it didn't make it completely go away. But it could be that it helped with the GERD and the stomach issues, and that helped the muscles relax a little bit, or the muscles relax a little bit and it helped with the GERD. I think they were both issues that were feeding into each other. But the diet did appear to help some. It helped, I think, with the worst symptoms, which were like me feeling like I couldn't breathe. And, I called the paramedics a couple times and they're just like, you're having anxiety. And it's like, no, the muscles are like stiff, they're not moving, and I had MRIs. The MRIs didn't show anything because they suspected it could be multiple sclerosis. They didn't show anything, so it was really difficult to get any kind of help. Eventually, that same doctor put me on Ivig, and that was the first time in many, many years that, well, actually, at that point, I think it had just been like 3 or 4 years, the muscles reacted to the Ivig. I mean, they had a very very noticeable reaction that I could feel in my body. They started twitching. I felt like fasciculations. Fasciculations are like when your muscles twitch a lot and it feels almost like you got a lot of little bugs jumping under your muscles. And they felt like they were opening and closing, opening and closing. Now, the unfortunate part was that the Ivig, Ivig is a treatment for SPS. I didn't know that at the time. The doctor didn't know that at the time either. But it did help the muscle stiffness. Now, I had that reaction to the first infusion, but it never happened again. The muscles kind of closed back up, and then little by little, they loosened up. They didn't go back to the way that they were prior to me developing this symptom, but they did loosen up enough to make me feel more comfortable. And it also gave me a clue into what was happening in my body, and it gave my doctor a really big clue as to what was going on. A lot of it was inflammation based. And that eventually did lead me to the SPS diagnosis. The fact that the Ivig had done something, now I was working backwards. And when I eventually lost my insurance and lost my Ivig, I went to many different doctors, but I knew what was going to help my symptoms, or what was going to what my muscles were going to respond to somewhat. So that did seem to help. Stretching, now the muscles are stiff. And this is one thing that, I was nagged within an inch of my life by my physical therapist, by my husband, who's a very athletic guy. They were like, you got to stretch and you got to strengthen. You got to stretch and you got to strengthen. Strengthening will make it worse. It makes the muscle stiffness worse. It's only going to make things stiffer, more sore, and more painful in the long run when you have stiff person syndrome. That's also one of the hallmarks of that condition, is that strengthening will actually make you stiffer. Now, stretching will not do anything for that muscle, but stretching the muscles around it that have not become stiff seems to help to sort of compensate. And that's one thing that I've noticed in my own journey, is that stretching the muscles. I'll stretch my arms. I have a whole stretching protocol that was prescribed by my physical therapist at the time. I haven't seen her in years, but I still have continued to do the stretches years later. And if I stop doing those stretches, my muscles, all of my muscles, seem to become a little bit stiffer. And it does make the muscle stiffness feel worse. So even though you can't stretch the stiff muscle, the muscles around it seem to, for whatever reason, relieve whatever, I guess, increased discomfort is there. I don't know how it works, but it's helped me a lot. Like I said, strengthening, I did a lot of strengthening on my pelvic floor, which I'll do another video discussing the symptoms of my pelvic floor. And I can only imagine how much damage and how much worse I was making the situation. By the time I started having symptoms in my rib cage, I knew good and well not to do any strengthening because it was only going to make matters worse. So that is the muscle stiffness and the muscle spasms. Well, I can't call it a spasm. It's to me, I say that it's a stiffness. It went into spasm and never went out. So that to me is stiffness. My symptoms do not fluctuate too much. Like I said, the IVIG helps. If I stop IVIG, I will feel increased stiffness or tightness. Um, and flares and stuff can also make those symptoms worse. Um, so I've been very diligent with my diet. I've been very diligent with my IVIG. I've been very diligent with my stretches. Even days when feel kind of tired, I'm like, I know I need to do my stretches because if I go 1 week without doing them, I do feel increased stiffness. Um, but other than that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that has helped. And I don't really think, I mean, physical therapy kind of helps, but again, it's like when the muscles go stiff, they go stiff. And there's very, very little that can be done, with the exception of medication that can really help it. So that's my muscle stiffness in my rib cage. I will do a separate video for the muscle stiffness in my pelvic floor, um, because it does feel different. It does have a different, especially the onset of the symptoms feels a bit different. So thank you for joining me. Please like and subscribe so that you can, also turn on the bell for notifications if you want to continue, being notified of this series. I will try to make this into a playlist, or I think I'll probably put it under my symptoms playlist. That way, there's an easy place to go to reference all of this. So, yeah, please like and subscribe, leave comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.